Hello, Heath the Car Theist here. Just a short video here for Instagram, our followers. This video might be helpful for some. Again, it's about the scientific method and how it's been misused, misappropriated by those who are starting with philosophical presuppositions as they use the scientific method, and thereby, by presupposing an agnostic position, they conclude with an agnostic position and say it's because of the use of the scientific method. It's just using science in a philosophical way, and oftentimes it's done by those who do so. They don't even recognize it. And so hopefully this video will point this out and also give you guys tools for how to approach those who are misappropriating the scientific method. And so this comes from, I'm going to get at two quotations from a response from a YouTube video or a YouTube spot called BITCH spot blog. So they got their own YouTube channel, and they responded to one of Jake's videos on the argument from intelligibility or intentionality in nature as a witness to God. Therefore, God is a necessity. They argued is just fickle and nonsense. And so I'm going to read their quotes, and then after that provide some of these answers on rightful use of the scientific method. So this is a quote. This is from their page. But that is not how that works. In the statement, if the moon exists, then it was made by magical leprechauns. Even though we can prove that P is valid and true, that is, that the moon exists, the conclusion is absolutely ludicrous. That is, leprechauns made the moon. And so he's responding to Jake's argument again that because of this, therefore this. And his argument is based on intelligence, therefore intelligent designer, God. Jake's argument was a little bit more complex than that. So we have links to all that if you're interested. So he goes on, he says, an argument is only potentially worthwhile if the premises are both true and valid, and the conclusion logically proceeds from the premises in any kind of demonstrable manner, which means every religious argument out there fails immediately because therefore God does not proceed logically from any of the premises that they present. It is yet another example of the divine fallacy, which is or has been coming up a lot lately because it is the core of religious apologetics. If X, then God is not rationally defensible, yet it is all they got, isn't it? So what BS blog here, I'm going to call him BS blog due to not wanting to pronounce their name. BS blog appears to be overlooking his use of logic and his use of the scientific method, in following his use of it and on the basis in which he's using it. You can't affirm anything meaningful, right? So just as much as one can conclude or cannot conclude on a theistic claim, therefore God, if he's consistent, it cannot support a genuine atheistic claim either, therefore not God, or an agnostic claim, therefore maybe not God. So so therefore not God does not proceed logically from any evidence or data that a strong atheist presents. In fact, we'll get at why the data points otherwise. And the same would go for an agnostic position, the moderate atheist, which is it should be just called agnosticism. They don't know whether or not God exists based on the scientific method and the way in which they're using it. So I just want to highlight one more quote, and then I'll get to the meat of this. I'll try to keep this short. And this is a quote. Even if your argument is completely logically consistent, that still doesn't mean that it is applicable to reality. So he's making a distinction between validity and soundness, or in inductive reasoning, it would be strength, weakness, cogency, a cogent argument. And back to the quote, you can have a perfectly valid syllogism about the Jedi, the Force, Star Wars, but the conclusion, even though it is absolutely warranted based on the premises, still has zero application to the real world that we live in. Of course, because that argument would be dealing with a fiction, and it's not not even intended to be doing with reality. So not a great example here. And back to the quote. And that's why we have made the point many times that you cannot prove reality with philosophy. It's simply the wrong tool for the job. If we are going to evaluate the real world, we need to use a tool that actually examines the real world objectively. That's not philosophy, it's science. Much to say about that statement. But the religious have nothing that can actually be evaluated by science, so they have to run around with a goalpost and play make-believe with philosophy. And I'm sorry, it doesn't matter how you feel, it doesn't work that way. So a little bit on the scientific method. What is it, and why is this important for, well, hopefully be a useful tool for our viewers and in witnessing and sharing the truth with individuals in a similar vein as BS Blog, who might be overlooking their assumptions in the use of how they're using the scientific method. But the scientific method is based upon what is called the hypothetical reasoning, period. That's the basis of it. Hypothetical reasoning is needed when one searches out explanations beyond direct observation, immediate observation, and or certain truth claims or certainty. Something that is certain would not employ the scientific method. But it should be of note that certainty and absolute truth claims actually do not exist for those, if we're drawing everything from the scientific method itself, just the scientific method. The scientific method is based on probability. It's induction, and can only construct models, templates for reality that are always subject to change. So nothing is ever certain, nothing is ever definitive. And this goes back to what is called, at the basis of this whole issue is the uniformity of nature. And so the scientific method rests itself upon the presupposition that nature will behave tomorrow as it is today, or in this very moment, it will continue to behave that way. And so the method itself is based upon this basic assumption, this basic faith assumption, and then proceeds from there to construct potential answers, which again are never certain because it's induction. It's an inductive method here, hypothetical reasoning. And with that said, to start with the assumption of the uniformity of nature as a principle without God as the starting point of uniformity is itself precluding God from the starting point without explicit proof or reason for doing so. And thus any employing of the scientific method with a godless starting point is employing the scientific method agnostically and thus philosophically. See where the error there is? It's if we're going to say there's a uniformity of nature, but we're not going to, and we start off saying we don't know whether or not God has brought about that uniformity, we're just going to call it uniformity and work from that. Right away, you've already assumed and made a philosophical claim, and now you're using the scientific method based upon that, and you're always going to conclude with uncertainty on all things. And this leads into the school of pragmatism and others' thought. But again, that's not based on the scientific method. It's based upon the use of the scientific method by presuppositions that are of the agnostic position, or maybe some would use it atheistically. Start out with there is no God. Of course, they're going to conclude with there is no God. But rather, if one is strictly using the scientific method and not presupposing that God is not behind the uniformity of nature, if just using observation, general observation and apparent norms, the normativity of nature itself indicate intelligent design. There's structure in life, structure in DNA, structure in the ecosystem, structure in our physiology on all levels. And so this would be lead, again, according to the scientific method, all probability that God is thus God over this creation. However, for the Christian, we don't lean on hypothetical reasoning when God himself has revealed himself to us by the Spirit in Christ. So we have an assurance of who God is, and we proclaim that assurance and pray for those who are rejecting the gospel, rejecting the person of Christ, and who died for transgressors, who died for those who would reject him. And by his Spirit, he calls us out and calls us forth and gives us that certainty of himself. And now we can look at nature and see it in all its awe and wonder. Again, it's all about misusing the scientific method.